Hopefully, sorry I'm the gringo that gets to speak English. My apologies. I'm also the guy who's missing his presentation, but hopefully it'll show up here sometime during the speech. It's much more interesting if I have pictures. Let me first thank Anthony Laub for inviting me to the Day of Energy. I've known Anthony for 16 years that I've worked here in Peru. I also want to say that I was privileged to know Jaime Q. Andres in his various various roles that he had, but he was really the guiding light that set in motion not only the current development of Camisea, but also the export project, Peru LNG. And under his guidance and stewardship, we now have effectively energy independence for Peru for the next 40 years. So I'm pleased to come down here and speak at this day. I will say that my comments are the comments of myself, not of Hun Oil. We're a private company. But that I will deliver a little bit about who we are and what we do here, and then talk a little bit about the pricing of natural gas, where we stand today and where we're going to be 10 years from now. Again, everybody has a view on this, but I'll try to explain sort of the rationale behind my view, because this does significantly affect the amount of royalties and taxes paid to the government of Peru. You don't have a device, do you? Okay, let me talk about who we are. Hunt Oil Company is a privately owned company. It's been around for 80 years. Our largest investment outside of the United States is in Peru. As you can see, we've invested in the Camisea fields. We've invested, as Adolfo just said, in TGP. We remember that for 14 years. We sold out recently in 2014. We invested in the Peru LNG export project, and then finally we recently, together with Pluspetrol and Repsol, drilled an exploratory well in the Madre de Dios area. If I could move to the next slide. The Madre de Dios area is probably our biggest exploration area. We drilled a well that was helicopter access only. As you can see from the top of the picture, it is way remote. It is somewhere between Cusco and Puerto Maldonado. And we drilled that well without incident. It took us about 6 months to drill it. It took us 4 years to get it ready. It was on a pad that is extremely remote. If you could add one more slide. So we drilled the well right about where the middle of the block is. Does he have the, actually, he hadn't found it, okay. On the next slide, it will show you the pad itself was a helicopter access. There we are, helicopter access only pad. You can see we put the drilling rig effectively on top of a mountain. You can see all the activity that we were doing during the drilling process. We're real proud to say that this is what it looks like today. We're about a week and a half away from exiting the pad. We've had over 4,500 helicopter flights to the pad. I was on 2 of them. We've logged over 2.5 million man-hours without an incident. We've moved 4,500 orchids that were indigenous to the area to other trees, and right now have saved 93% of them. We work with the Smithsonian and have 5 new field guides. We work with Duke Medical. We have over 4,000 baseline medical surveys. What we did was we followed Jaime Q. Andres' leadership, and we were good stewards when we were out here. It wasn't just about finding oil and gas, which we did not, but rather taking care of the community that we were operating in, being sensitive to the social and environmental issues in the area we were in, and frankly leaving the area as if it was pristinely unchanged. Obviously, we are proud to be a partner in Camisea. Pluspetrol has led that for the last 16 years. We are proud to be a member that produces 1.7 BCF a day of gas and about 100,000 barrels of oil. And then finally, our last investment, if you could move to the next slide, is Peru LNG. It is the LNG export project that resides about 170 kilometers south of where we are right now. It operates on a facility that's about 520 hectares. There we go. Thank you very much. This side will do, okay. Maybe we'll figure out which one of these buttons to press. But anyway, this is the Peru LNG facility. We put about 620 million cubes a day into the plant. We make it into LNG. It's a 600 to 1 reduction, and it's about 275 degrees below zero when we put it on a ship. Let's see, how about this direction? Nope. How about this other direction? There we go. Ships are about 1,000 feet long. They can now go through the Panama Canal as of about a year ago. It costs $1 million to go through there, but you can see from this picture how massive the operation is. That trestle is about a mile long. The reason we did it is we have to get a area that the ships have enough clearance so that they can actually load, because they drop a number of meters as they load. Finally, what we're doing out of Peru LNG is we're building, there's a pipeline. I was very proud to listen to Adolfo. He has done great maintenance. We work together because Peru LNG owns about 400 kilometers of the pipe that's side by side with the TGP pipe. Ours looks just like theirs through remote areas, but the two companies have done a great job in trying to prevent any breaks in the system, and I think over the last 3 or 4 years have done very, very well. Last thing is we are currently building a truck loading facility. I know we were just talking a little bit about how to get gas to rural areas of Peru. One of the ways to do it is you load a truck with LNG and you either go north or south, and I think we have both of those concessions now signed up. We expect to have this operating by the spring of 2017, and the trucks are again available to go either direction, so that gas will be able to go economically to more rural areas. Finally, this just gives you an indication. We did have a dual system. Our system just takes gas from where we pick it up at kilometer 211 to the plant. But nonetheless, takeaway here is that Hunt's biggest investment worldwide is in Peru. We're here to stay. We enjoyed the experience of exploring in Madre de Dios. We are actively looking at additional licenses where we could become another partner in the exploration arena. We like the environment of Peru. Let's talk about Peru. So I'm going to switch now from Hunt to Peru natural gas, and then we're going to move into United States natural gas, and finally talk about the price of natural gas and LNG. The Camisea Consortium developed massive gas reserves in Block 88, but we're not the only game in town anymore. Repsol is developing additional gas reserves in Block 57, and CNPC is expected to file a development plan for Block 58, so that the gas available both for domestic and export is significantly larger than most any country I know of other than those in the Middle East. In fact, the gas reserves discovered in Peru outstrip your gas demand domestically for 40 years. In the United States, we only have 24 years of reserves. So Peru has a wonderful benefit of being a net exporter of gas for a long time. In addition, there's a significant amount of royalties that are paid to the government. Now, obviously, royalty is dependent upon the price. The beautiful thing is you can see that the price went up in 2011, 12, and 13. The amount of royalty that we paid from the two blocks, and of course they're different colored. The dark block is for your domestic gas sales, and the light block with the little red on top is for your export gas sales. When the price of gas is high, guess what happens? Peru gets a lot of money. When the price of gas is low, guess what happens? Nobody gets a lot of money. We're all in this together because you get a percentage of it, not a profit tier, but a percentage. And so if our percentage goes down, your percentage goes down by exactly the same amount. What happened is the Henry Hub price went from $8 at the end of 2011 to $4 at the end of 2014 to $2 at the end of 2015 to $1.70 in February 2016. When you build these plants and build these Camisea systems, they cannot work at $1.70. So while the government royalty take has gone down significantly in 2016, and that's not the expected take for the year, that's the expected take through the end of August. What we started with the Block 88 substitution, we started putting Block 57 gas into the export project in 2014, but then the price dropped precipitously. There is no volume difference associated with 2015 and 16. Let me show you. Here's the amount of gas that was sold. If you look at the yellow lines on top, that's associated with the export project. If you look at the two other groups on the bottom, that's associated with domestic consumption. Look at the flatness of these lines. There's not a lot of change. However, the price went down radically. And so when the price goes down radically, the royalties paid to the government are going down radically. Even so, in 2015, under this regime, let me go back here, the total amount of royalties paid to the government was over $500 million. That's a lot of money. I think the royalties paid in 2016 will be over $300 million. But nonetheless, the issue that we're facing is not about the royalties, but about the price. So let's talk a little bit about that. Well, I'm sorry, let me finish with the existing sales in Peru. So what's going to happen in Peru? Well, this is a look forward. And as you can see, there's no change in the export quantity of gas. It is 620 million cubes a day. It's a fixed deal. However, there is slight increases in domestic demand of gas, somewhere between 3 and 5%, but almost wonderfully predictable. And so there's no issue that for the next 25 years, the current existing reserves are enough to supply local demand and export demand. So you are in a uniquely blessed position of having adequate gas supply. However, the key question then becomes, so what's going to happen to the price of gas worldwide, which affects the government royalties and take? All right, let's talk about that. North America is the swing place for the price of gas. All the experts say it. North America is basically the surplus supplier of gas into the market. So let's talk about what the price of North American gas, or what we call Henry Hub, is going to be. We're first going to talk about what we have in terms of filling the gas supply, i.e. where the gas comes from. Then we're going to talk about what we're going to use the gas for, where we're going to send it. Radical shift happened in the United States in 2008, and that is called the shale gale. Prior to 2008, most gas produced in the United States was from conventional gas fields. Also the nearshore Gulf of Mexico, but it was conventional gas. The reason the shale gale shifted in 2008 had nothing to do with technology. It had to do with price. We always knew how to frack wells by putting additional sand and water into the well, injecting it into the rock, letting the water come out, have the sand stay in the rock, and hold just a tiny fissure to allow that gas to seep out. You know why we didn't do it? The well cost $2 million and the frack job cost $4 million. It was just simply economics. However, when the price of gas got to $8, you can frack wells. And so what happened? We started fracking wells like crazy. This is, let me see if I can get to the, so here's what happened. We started drilling wells. We drilled wells all the way through 2008. Look at the rig count in 2008. You're over 1,500 rigs drilling gas wells. Why? It was wildly profitable. What happened in 2008? Price dropped from $8 to $4. Guess what? About half of your wells are not profitable at $4. So what did we do? We're smart guys. We stopped drilling. Very simple, right there. There's the dip. What happened then is it looked like it was going back to $5, so we started drilling again. Then we found out, oh no, it's going to drop all the way down to $2. You can see the price down here. As it drops, the rig count goes down. So at the end of 2008, we had 1,500 rigs. Guess how many rigs we had at the end of 2014 drilling for gas? 45 rigs. Well, guess what's going to happen if we don't drill for gas? We're going to run out because, as everybody knows in this room, it's a depleting idea. Once you drill the wells, its best year is the year that you drill it. Every year thereafter, it starts to deplete. And as you know, the non-conventional wells deplete faster than the conventional wells. But we switched from drilling conventional wells to drilling non-conventional wells. Let me show you this slide here. This is the growth in just non-conventional wells. Okay, forget the conventional. That was basically flatlined during this period because we quit drilling them. Look how much we've grown in the non-conventional wells, dominated by Marcellus, and I'm going to come back to that. But all of these are areas of the United States where we drilled and fracked gas. Guess what happened? We quit doing that 2 years ago. We haven't drilled hardly any, but as you can see, it has had a massive effect. Now, the one part of this slide I want you to look at closely is this part right there. For the first time in 6 years, Shale gas dropped in the United States in March, dropped a tiny little bit, about half a BCF. But this trend is now starting to continue, and guess what? Once you top over the end, it's going to drop very rapidly. February 2016 was the peak. We produced just over 80 BCF a day in the United States. Shale gas was accounting for an ever-increasing percentage, but it started to decline. Right now, we're only producing 79 BCF a day. Okay, we still got a lot of extra to get through, but finally, we're filling at a less rate. That's a good thing. Some analysts predict 6% year-over-year decline. I think that's underestimating the decline given the fact that we have a high percentage of non-conventional wells. Non-conventionals will accelerate the decline rate. Okay, but you guys are real smart here and you say, wait a minute. You're drilling for oil, and I know when you drill for oil, there's associated gas. That's right. However, again, for the first time in a long time, the associated gas with oil wells has now started to decline, not increase. And the reason is we're drilling far less oil wells. Currently, they're projecting an 8% year-over-year decline in the associated gas. Overall takeaway from this part of the presentation. U.S. gas supply is starting to decline, first time in a long time. That's a good thing. Let's talk about what we do with the gas. Well, we used to get additional gas from Canada. This is kind of a complicated slide, but if you look at the green line is net imports because we had some exports and some imports, right? The blue line is the amount we import, the red line is the amount we export, the green line is adding those two together. What happens is by 2017, we are not going to be a net importer of gas from Canada. We're going to be net neutral. So we're not getting any more gas from there. That's obviously now we just look at the U.S. gas supply. Okay. What about LNG? Remember, we were going to import all the LNG back in 2016 or 2006. So let's look at what happened. 2005 and 6, we were peaking our LNG, but the expectation was that we were going to be way above where we are. Well, what happens is shale gale came, $8 gas, you drill a bunch of wells, and no more LNG is coming to the United States. The Cheniere terminal used to be a terminal that was receiving gas. They flipped it. And for $4 billion, you can now send gas out of Cheniere, not bring gas into Cheniere. Same thing happened in Baja. They had a facility there that was expected to take in gas. It has hardly taken in any gas. What's going on in the United States is you have 5 different trains that are coming online to send LNG out, not take LNG in. So we are becoming a net exporter of LNG. Third, storage. Everybody hears about the fact that in the United States we are oversupplied in our storage, and yes, if you look at this chart again, you can see we are at the very, very peak of the 5-year average. However, this chart's 2 months old. If you now draw it out, we are about right there. So we are starting to drop below the 5-year average in storage, which means we're burning through gas faster than we're filling it up. Again, that depends on the winter, but when you have less storage, your price becomes more volatile. Unclear on the Northeast winter projections. I'm not smart enough to know that, but I do know that the highest amount of gas in storage, 2.5 TCF, happened in March 2016, and it has not gone up since then. It is going down. So the amount of gas in storage, I think, will go back to the 5-year average or less by the end of this winter. Then they said, okay, how much gas do we use in the United States? In other words, what is our burn rate through the use of gas and electricity, just like you? We use gas for electricity in the United States. 2015 was the 5th consecutive growth year in U.S. gas demand. As you can see from this chart right here, in 2016, we are averaging significantly above not only the 5-year average, but the top of the 5-year peaks. So 2016, we are consuming more gas than we ever have in the United States. That's not going to change. Finally, gas to Mexico. This is not the LNG we talk about, but this is pipeline gas to Mexico. As you know, we have started piping gas to Mexico. They made it legal they finally got this done right here. Oops, sorry. They finally got it done so we could take care of piping it in 2000. We are building the infrastructure right now. The infrastructure is still not completed. We're putting 3.7 BCF a day into the pipe. By 2019, when the pipe system is complete, we think we will put 15 BCF a day into pipe in Mexico. Has to come from somewhere, right? Question is, will the production response, additional drilling, be fast enough to anticipate the demands by Mexico? Finally, the demand I alluded to earlier is our U.S. LNG exports. Here's what's happening. We're adding 5 trains of exports. We've already added 1, and the second one is currently being tested right now. But over the next year and a half, we're going to add 5 trains. The export capacity in the United States is going to step up to about 12 BCF a day. Again, if I send 15 BCF a day to Mexico and let's reduce it to 7 BCF a day LNG, I still got to come up with 20 BCF a day. I got to come up with something. That means I need to start drilling, right? Well, you look at the drilling rig count and it hadn't responded yet. You sort of say, well, why is that? Why haven't producers responded to the anticipated crisis in the price of gas? And the reason is our balance sheets have been decimated by the elongated trough of low gas prices. Most gas producers are struggling to hang on. The people who drilled for shale gas are not the big international oil companies, but rather the local producers, and they're still trying to get their balance sheets in order so they can survive, not spend money. So I think you have a significant lag time that's occurring. Okay, let's talk about the future price. What's going to happen to Henry Hub in 2017 as the use or the demand for gas begins to outstrip the supply? First, I think you're going to have continued fuel switching, which means I think you're going to continue to see people move from coal to to gas in firing electric plants in the United States. There's a tremendous amount of pressure on trying to have coal retirements. I know this is a crazy idea, but I'm anticipating a new Democratic president next time around. Not going to go there, but I'm just anticipating it, which means we're going to have additional coal plant retirements, which means you have to use natural gas to fire the electricity, right? Okay. I'm anticipating about a 20% change over the next 3 years in the amount of natural gas used to fire electric plants. Second is weather. I don't think I can determine weather. I'm not smart enough. If anybody has a view, if it's a harsh winter, it's a higher demand. If it's an easy winter, it's less demand. Finally is factories, and we don't see any growth. You guys were really neat. You were talking about being unhappy with a 2% growth. In the United States, our growth is flatlined. We don't think we're going to have any industrial growth at all, maybe 1%. But in other words, the factory use of electricity is going to be relatively stable. Okay, so where's the production response? Well, people are now saying there's an 18-month lag time in the rig from the time you purchase the rig for use and the time you produce the gas. So there's a minimum of 18-month lag time. I think it's longer because, again, I don't think people are going to get back to the level of CapEx spending for these drilling programs that they were in 2014, given the fact that, yes, it's $3.30 today, but a year ago it was less than half. And who says it's not going to be less than half a year from now? And so the commitment of capital for 18 months when you don't know the price is going to be a wild card. The other wild card that I want you to know about is, remember where I showed you how much Marcellus gas made up the non-conventional? It was a lion's share. Well, here's the secret in the United States that people don't like to talk about. You can't bring that gas to Mexico or to the LNG export terminals because the pipeline system doesn't work that way. We would have to reverse several of the pipes, which means we're going to redirect the gas from going one way to the other. You think that's not hard. It's not, so long as everybody agrees. But when you have an integrated, complicated pipeline system that's not owned by one person but multiple entities, reversing flows along pipes takes a while. And so, yes, we have gas in the Marcellus, but it doesn't get to the marketplaces you want it to get to, which causes disintermediation, which I think affects your price. So wild card in the Marcellus. Other unspoken wild card that we don't talk about is you need fracking crews to produce non-conventional gas. Guess who got burned the worst with the downturn? Fracking companies. They didn't do a single day's worth of repair to any of that equipment over the last 3 years. It sat outside in a field in the rain and in the cold. That equipment cannot be fired up to be as good as it was the day we stopped using it, and no one has bought new frac equipment because the demand is so pathetic. So the real discussion we're having is, even if you got the drilling rigs back operating, how many frac crews can you run to handle it? And the conventional wisdom is about 600-700 rigs is about the maximum amount we can handle. So even if you start drilling, you may not be able to get the gas to market. Okay, let's talk about LNG and finish this. Worldwide LNG. Oops, sorry, I got the... All right, here's your natural gas price outlook. I think we are, yeah, good. As you can see, the markets are converging finally. You had this wild disintermediation that occurred due to the instability of the Asian LNG market, mostly caused by the Japanese crisis with nuclear fuel use, but also just simply having a disconnect between the LNG supply and the LNG demand. That reconciled, sadly in part because of the Asian flu, slowed those economies down a little bit, but also in part because additional LNG was coming online. What you're seeing is you're getting to a place where LNG will be priced solely on transportation differentials. LNG worldwide last year had 250 million tons on the water, 250 million tons per annum of LNG on the water. 5 years from now, it's going to have 350 million tons on the water. You got Australia bringing a massive amount online, and you got the United States bringing its online. I'm very proud, however, to see that little LNG facility over there on Peru's coast that knocks out about 4 million tons per annum. But what you're going to see here is you're going to see a softening of the LNG market for the first 2 years in 18, 19, and 20 as you overproduce LNG, because you can't time these plants coming online, and it's sort of bumpy the way they come online relative to demand. Demand's relatively consistent. However, and this is my favorite slide of the presentation, this is what happens in 2020. What you have is your existing base load of operations of LNG, and the reason it's going down is there's probably some thought that in Algeria some of those plants may be actually running out a little bit. You have the under construction part of it, which is the yellow, and that's all these different plants in the United States and Australia that are going to come online between now and 2017. That's the 100 million tons per annum I just told you was going to come on the water. But what happens? There has not been a final investment decision on an LNG plant for 3 years, and there will not be a final investment decision in this year. If they take 4.5 years to build and you don't make the investment decision until 2017, you can't bring it online until 2021 or 2022. However, LNG demand is steady state because it's basically the growing countries demanding additional energy to fuel their factories and their homes. You have a big disintermediation that occurs about 2021, and that is your LNG demand is going to significantly outstrip your LNG supply. That's where it gets interesting. This is why I think there's a tremendous focus upon how do we increase gas production in the long term, but yet convince people that this is where you should spend your CapEx today. Hope that was provocative enough. Let me end with one thought. We've been in Peru for 16 years. I've been part of this for 3 years. I was actually touching it for a long time. One of the things that we do in a downward trough is we understand that we have to buckle together a little bit. I'm really proud of the Hunt team that's here today. There's probably 12 of us that are here today that have focused on let's get through this downturn. It will not last forever. As you can see, it is starting to remedy itself right now with $3.30 gas and $50 oil. And in addition, we really focus on sustainability and integrity on our operations. Real proud of what happened in Madre de Dios, the fact that we're just about to have our last helicopter flight in and didn't have a single incident out there. So we're proud to be part of the Peru team. I'm proud to be here, and thanks for letting me have an opportunity.
Me acaban de hacer entrega de las preguntas del público. The first is, could you tell us what is the situation, prospects of royalty on exports of LNG?
Yes, is this on? Okay, yes. So LNG exports are typically, the royalties paid on LNG exports are a percentage of the purchase price of those exports paid to the government, and the rest of the money goes to the various people along the value chain, the people who ship the LNG, the people who make the LNG, the people who sell the gas to the LNG plant, and the people who transport the LNG along the pipeline. So there's multiple players that share in the ultimate dollars that are given for the purchase of LNG. I think the LNG market, and there's been a lot in here in Peru about the LNG going to Mexico. I think one thing that's important to remember is in the LNG marketplace, it's a radically shifting marketplace, and it's you know, we do these contracts for 18 years, but year over year things change, and I think you're seeing things change significantly in the world right now with the addition of 100 million tons of LNG coming online over the next 5 years.
Okay, this is my question, okay? Sorry, excuse me. My English isn't good, but I tried to speak better possible. Okay, about energy, but also honesty. From your point of view, is the natural gas a good business for countries like Peru? For their government? It's true? When you're talking, I saw rankings on internet about production and exports of gas. Peru doesn't appear. Venezuela, Bolivia, yes, but Peru doesn't. Is a good business, really?
Well, the reason Peru doesn't appear is because Venezuela had such significant, and Bolivia had such significant investment in their oil and gas, and obviously Venezuela had an oil and gas structure that at its peak produced a significant amount of barrels per day. I think they're significantly down from that. I mean, I think the hard part is that the oil and gas business is a business that changes a great deal day to day, month to month, year to year. Even in the simplistic world of fracking, how you frack a single well in a single area is changed by the grains of sand used, whether or not you put in glass, the amount of water, the amount of lubricants. And so to understand the modifications of technology, it's important to be in the business in multiple locations. Certainly the integrateds have an advantage on everybody in this because they have multiple operations, and the technology that you learn increases daily your ability to drill wells better. I think the difficulty for some governments in getting in the business is keeping that arm of technology change because they're just not drilling enough wells. However, I think the business model that has worked the best in most countries, really from Saudi Arabia to Peru, I think currently to many countries in the world, is the public-private partnership, because the government monitors, receives revenue, and also is the steward of the operations, and then the private company brings their expertise and technology to the table, and if you marry the two, I think they're very good together.
Okay, and this question is more specific. What do you think the government of Peru needs to do for creating more incentives for companies like decide to continue investing in Peru?
Real good
in this
question.
low prices environment?
Right, real good question. Obviously, the price environment is the biggest determinative. And so one thing you have to do in any government, whether it's this government or any host government that we participate in, is you have to realize the amount of capital available for exploration under a $50 or sub-50 pricing is not significant. So you're really, in that environment, it's difficult to compete for dollars because there aren't very many dollars. However, if the price goes up, and I think we all expect it to go up, then the question becomes whether your rule of law, whether the regulatory regime, and whether your royalty pricing are attractive. Assuming the stability of the government, it's a huge factor for us. The stability of the rule of law is a big factor. And then is it an environment that we can operate both safely and follow the regulatory environment? And I think those are all critical.
Okay, thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you very
Aplausos,
much.
por favor, para nuestro expositor.